My name is Isabella, and I'm 27 years old, working in a creative position at a software company in Florida. To everyone around me, it probably looks like I have it all together: a stable job, a good income, and a bright future. But my life is far from perfect. Just a year ago, everything was thrown into chaos when my dad's company went bankrupt, forcing me to move back in with my parents and younger sister Mary to help keep the family afloat. Since then, my paycheck has become our lifeline. One evening, while we were all sitting together after dinner, my mom brought up an issue, seemingly out of the blue. "Isabella," she started, looking at me with an uncomfortable smile. "Mary mentioned she'd like pork steaks for dinner tomorrow. Could you spare a little more for the grocery budget?" Her tone was casual, but her words hit me like a wave. Groceries were already tight, and they knew it. I sighed, feeling the familiar weight of frustration. "Mom, I've already given $10,000 this month. That should be more than enough." But before I could say anything else, Mary chimed in with a laugh that sent a shiver down my spine. "Big sis, that's just not enough for a family of 4, she said, shaking her head as though I was the one being unreasonable. "Not enough?" My voice shook with disbelief. "If it's so hard to manage, maybe you could help out by getting a part-time job, Mary. Plenty of people do that." But my suggestion barely had time to hang in the air before Mom jumped to her defense. "It's not that simple," she said, almost as if rehearsed. "Mary's been looking for jobs, but it's hard out there." Anger rose within me. I knew the truth. Mary spent her days at home, scrolling through her phone or watching TV. Meanwhile, I was the one covering all the expenses, waking up early every morning to prepare breakfast and pack my dad's lunch before heading to work. But no matter how much I contributed, it was never enough. They always sided with Mary, the golden child who could do no wrong. As the weeks went by, my frustration grew, and so did my desire to break free from the never-ending demands. Then one evening, as I arrived home after a long day at work, something felt off. The house was unusually quiet. I didn't see Mary's shoes by the door, and when I asked my parents about her, they simply shrugged, saying she had gone out. Days passed, and Mary didn't return. My parents didn't seem overly concerned, but I felt a knot of unease growing in my stomach. Then, one evening, I overheard a snippet of their conversation while passing the living room. "I can't wait for the souvenirs from Louisiana," Mom was saying with a smile. "Mary is really lucky, relaxing on those beaches and dining at fancy places." I stopped in my tracks, feeling a jolt of shock. Louisiana? My parents must have noticed my expression because they looked at me, surprised. "Didn't you know?" Dad asked innocently. "Mary won a trip in some sweepstakes. She's been sending us pictures of her vacation." As I tried to process this, the question swirled in my mind. How was Mary funding this trip? I knew she didn't have any money saved, and I had been so careful with my spending. But the mystery didn't last long. The next day, while I was at work, my phone rang, a call from my credit card company. "We wanted to confirm some recent charges on your card," the representative said, listing purchases I didn't recognize. Panic shot through me. "How much has been spent?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. $20,000 over the past 4 days, the representative replied calmly. The answer knocked the air out of me. Only one person could have done this: Mary. She must have taken my card and used it for her vacation. Determined to confront her, I dialed her number, and after a few rings, she answered, sounding almost smug. "Oh, hey, big sis. I thought you'd be calling for your souvenirs," she said with a laugh. My voice trembled with anger. "Mary, you used my credit card without permission. Do you realize how serious this is?" She shrugged it off. "It's not that big of a deal. We're family, after all," she replied, her voice so casual it felt like a slap. My mind reeled. How could she brush off stealing thousands like it was nothing? And worse, my parents didn't seem to care. They defended her every step of the way, even as I threatened to cancel the card. As days passed, my parents' support for Mary only intensified, leaving me feeling more isolated and betrayed than ever. But then something changed. One evening, Mary's carefree attitude took a turn. She tried using my credit card again, only to find it had been canceled. Panicked, she turned to our parents, who promptly confronted me, furious. "Your sister is in another state without any money and you just left her stranded?" Mom shouted. "That's exactly what she deserves for using my card without asking," I replied firmly. But my parents wouldn't hear it. They pleaded, saying Mary was in trouble and that I had to do something to help her. They even suggested I cover her expenses while she figured things out. Enough is enough, I said, feeling the final thread of patience snap. With my decision made, I started planning an escape from this nightmare. I called a real estate agent I knew, explaining my situation and my plan to sell the house. Unbeknownst to my family, the house was legally in my name, a decision my father had made in a moment of financial desperation. Now, I was ready to use that to my advantage. Days later, with the arrangements in place, I told my parents about my plan, suggesting they all move in with my strict but supportive grandmother in Miami. "Grandma's excited to see everyone," I added with a forced smile, but they were horrified. "You sold our home?" Mom gasped, and even Dad looked pale. "We can't just leave. This is our life." Calmly, I reminded them of the papers they had signed, giving me ownership. My dad's face fell as the memory resurfaced, and Mom's protests dwindled into silence. I explained that I had arranged for their belongings to be sent to Grandma's, where they could work in her restaurant and finally learn some responsibility. They had no other choice. When they returned from Louisiana, all three of them looked at me in disbelief, still unwilling to accept what had happened. "You can't do this, Isabella," Mary cried, her once arrogant tone now laced with desperation. But I stood firm. I can, and I have. In the weeks that followed, my family adjusted to their new life under Grandma's strict supervision. As for me, I found a cozy apartment closer to work and began to rebuild my life with newfound independence and peace. There were no more demands, no more accusations, and no more financial burdens weighing me down. But just as I was beginning to feel content, my phone rang unexpectedly one evening. Grandma's name appeared on the screen, and as I answered, her voice carried a mix of pride and concern. "Isabella, they're changing," she said softly. "Your parents and even Mary, they're finally realizing what you went through." Her words touched something deep within me, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. But I wasn't ready to forgive so easily. "Give it time," I told her, my heart conflicted. Several months passed, and one day, I received a call from Mary herself. Her voice was hesitant, almost unrecognizable. She asked to meet in person, saying she needed to apologize properly. Though wary, I agreed. When she walked into the cafe, her face was bare, her posture humble, and for the first time, I sensed a genuine change in her. "I'm sorry, Isabella, truly," she began, her voice breaking. She explained how hard it had been working under Grandma's supervision, how it had opened her eyes to everything I had done for her and the family. She had finally understood the sacrifices I had made. As she spoke, the resentment and hurt I had held onto for so long began to melt away. We spent hours talking, reconnecting, and for the first time in years, I saw my sister as someone I could trust. She handed me an envelope, a small sum of money she had earned, and it symbolized more than just financial repayment. It was her acknowledgement, her way of trying to make things right. A few weeks later, I visited Grandma's house for a family dinner. My parents greeted me with tears in their eyes, apologizing sincerely for the years of unfair treatment. We sat together, reminiscing, laughing, and for a moment, it felt like the family I had always wanted. It would take time to heal fully, but we were finally on the right path. Grandma pulled me aside before I left, her gaze warm but serious. "Isabella, strength is important, but don't forget to hold on to kindness," she said, hugging me tightly. In that moment, I felt a wave of relief and hope for the future, knowing that maybe, with patience, we could rebuild our family into something stronger and more honest. And as I walked out of her house, the weight I had carried for so long lifted, leaving me with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. It was the start of a new chapter, a life free from resentment, filled with possibility, and built on a foundation of hard-earned forgiveness.